So welcome you all to the Digital Fifth Knowledge Series on the product management. I think some of you may be already attending the previous two sessions, right? So this is a kind of the series program that we are running on every Thursday or alternate Friday. So this is a third session in the same league of the product management. So with that, we'll just get started. I don't want to go through the Digital Fifth because many of you might have already been aware, and there are some new guys are joining in the sessions. So we are the Digital Fifth. We are the digital and fintech consulting startup firm in the country, primarily focused on working with the banks, financial institutions, the fintechs, NBFCs in the country, predominantly working into the digital and product advisory. Okay. We also run our own Bharat Fintech Summit. Some of you might have attended in the month of February that we carried out the largest fintech event in the country. We're focused agenda on the what's happening in the fintech and the digital banking domain, right? So that's where this is just a broad overview of some of the customers that we have worked into across areas, be it on the building the digital strategy, digital transformation journeys, the product design, product development, go to the market, building the business models. So across the different things, as well as the corporate trainings on the digital lending area, right? And probably fourth services, if you look at it, that we have working in the consulting business, consulting services, the partnership, the recruitment, where we help the corporates to hire the senior professional in the product management, in the digital areas, as well as we do lots of the corporate trainings. These are just a broad overview of our consulting services. So as I was talking about that digital advisory, where the digital maturity model, the benchmarking, building the digital strategy for the banks or financial institutions, or designing the product. So across that complete digital advisory. The open banking, we do a lot work into the API strategy, API journeys, API development. So that's where we work. We work a lot on the fintech and startup advisory. As well as that, we work security and the compliance, again in the BFSI domain, and research and the content management. We are that building the reports, very curated reports for the partners. And this is just a brief on our trainings, where we do trainings across open banking, digital lending, digital payment, embedded finance, product management, cyber security, across all various customers that we have done across the banks, fintechs, and non-fintechs as well. Okay, so just coming back, so this is the series that we have been running. We have already concluded the two series, where the first series we have run the basic concept of product management, product manager's role, what is the customer centricity, the life cycle. And this is the third in the series, where the product management process and the pricing economics that we, and the next week that will be coming at the final series of the fourth one, which is on the talking about the critical success factor and the products selling the digital transformation. So with this, we just get started. And just quick introduction from my side, guys. I'm Shashank, Shekhar, working with the Digital Fifth as a head of consulting and the co-founder. Previous experience coming with L&T, Infotech, and the Wipro, more into technology in the cybersecurity advisory space. And then being part of the DCB Bank, where that I've been involved into the complete digital transformation of the bank and carrying out the multiple roles. And then I joined Samir as a part of the Digital Fifth. So that's quick, short introduction from my side. And please put away your questions in the question section, as well as we'll keep on taking a break for any questions. Okay, so before we go into the today's agenda of the focusing on the digital product development process part of it, we'll just take a quick recap of the previous two sessions. So we'll not try to go deeper into that, but just try to touch upon that what we have so far covered. So how do you define a product, right? And that's where the critical beat on the, like, you look at the non-financial areas or the financial area, you can define either is a kind of the goods or the services which are sold as a unified kind of the entity, or it could be a part of features also when you start looking in from the digital agenda, from the digital perspective, right? Mobile banking, so you can have one products, or it could be a combination of different products. So like one card or HDFC loan that you talk about it, or the Jupiter in the Neo Bank in the retail space, right? So these are the different products that can be defined. And when you start looking at the product from that, wherever you design a product, right, where the existing product or the new product that you're trying to bring it into the market. So probably a couple of things that you need to be taking care of from the overall the product perspective, right? So you need to have the clarity about that, what kind of the vision and mission that product that you're looking. So it's a kind of the long term, right, which can have the business angle, business numbers also aligned to that, right? Then you start putting up the high level goals, right? Which segments that, which market that you're trying to get into, that what kind of the business that you're trying to build on that particular product. Then you start building up the group of features, right? Creating the epics, and then you start breaking down into different features, and each of the features may start building up the different requirements. So, in previous sessions, you can go to our channels on the YouTube, where that you can get that complete webinars, complete session on these topics, where that you can get a deeper insights on each of the components. Just for the recap purpose, I'm just running through. So when you start talking about the digital product side, what makes a product successful, right? So definitely some of the elements that as a product manager or as a aspiring product manager or as a business leader that you need to be focusing on. So you need to have a very clear understanding that what are the customer needs are there, right? What are the areas that you're trying to solve for that customer? So that's where your focus should be there. And I'll talk about some of this more into when we start going into the development process part of it. It's not a one-time activity, like you design certain expectations, certain features, and then it's going to, it has to be completely iterative. It means that you need to go to the market, take the feedback, come back, look at the scenarios, then maybe adapt to the different scenarios and keep on reworking on your product landscapes, right? Very important that you need to also look at that how you're going to do the product positionings, right? Which segment, which market, which elements that you need to focus upon, right? Creating differentiations, right? So one of the critical component is that when you're getting into the especially financial product market, you may have lots of the player already, right? So for example, if you're building a neobank product, you may already find out that lots of players are there into neobanking, and everybody may be working into the different segments, or maybe the segment that you're looking into, you already may find out that some of the players, which some of the products already there. So how do you create a differentiation from the customer perspective? And it has to link with that your customer needs and the problem statements very clearly. Look at that, try to minimize the scope change, right? Because when you're building into the MVP stage and moving into the V1, version 1, version 2 kind of things, you need to clearly define the scope and see that there are very minimal changes. Because otherwise it may continue, it may derail your entire the plan part of it and may de-align you from the goals that you're looking for it, right? Very important is that you define some success criteria, success metrics, that what are the KPIs from the customer perspective, from the market perspective, from your business perspective. Have some numbers in the mind, some kind of structure in the mind, which you can monitor. Say, for example, you launch an MVP and you want to see that, okay, like, say, for example, 10% of the customers should be able to consume the features that you've been building upon it. So that's, I'm just taking an example. So that's where you need to have some certain success matrices to be defined. And time is the matter, right? When in the digital product, today's fast moving economy, right? Where that lots of the changes are happening in the industry, you need to have that kind of the speed and the timely launch. And while you're working in the product, you may have the long roadmap, long gestation period for the building of the different phases. You need to make sure that you are continuously aligned with your customers, because they start with your customer needs and it has to lead with the kind of the relationship, how the customer is perceiving, how the customer is using that feature. So these are some of the product criteria that you need to be very careful about it when you're building a successful digital product. And as a product manager, right, you need to be very clear about your role. And today it's like you need to be handling the multiple hats, right? You may be involved into the sales process, where because you are building the product, how the sales will happen, how the development will happen. So you need to work very closely with the development team. So have some understanding of the development tools, frameworks, which will use for the development purpose. The customer, like you need to also act like a customer, as a customer, that how you're going to use that product. Will you be able to use that product? Is that also solving your problem statement? The support part of the marketing, like how you're going to outreach to the market, how you're going to communicate what are your products in the market, right? Carrying out the research, be it on the primary research, the secondary research, interacting with the customers, looking at the competitors, those all the aspects has to be taken care. So you need to play a deeper role into the research. And as well as finance, very important, right? You need to be clearly responsible for P&L of your product, right? So what are the expenses going to be there? How the revenue structure are going to be there? Are you going to make the profit? When are you going to do the break even for that particular product? That's responsibility will also lies with you. And some of the legal regulatory compliance aspects, you can't be making it to the legal guy or the compliance or the regulatory guy to take care of it. And especially I'm talking about more into the financial product side of it, because it's a very regulatory driven. You need to be very careful about the regulatory landscapes. And just quick, we also covered the product life cycle, which goes through kind of the curve where that you have the early stage where you are introducing, right? So, for example, the cred, when it was launched 5 years back, it was an early stage, but now it's in the growth where that it's scaling up with the different features, different product parameters, right? And somewhere down the line, it will attain the maturity. If similarly, we want to understand from the market different segments, maybe look at the Facebook or the Twitter, which may be moving into the maturity stage, where that they have tested the product, they have been successful, they've grown with their customers base, they have launched the multiple products, but now you are getting into the maturity. While some stage, somewhere, either it may start going to decline stage, or you may have to look into the pivoting, that because other competitors are coming, market expectations are changing. That's where you will need to start looking into that, whether it's you need to shut down that product or you may need to pivot, right? Very clear example, maybe that's Nokia, right? It gone to its maturity stage, but moment the competitors came from Android and the iOS, you start moving into the decline stage. So that's where the entire product life cycle goes. So this was just a quick on the recap side of it. I don't want to spend much time because focus areas that we'll try to cover into the product development process. Again, I will tell you that you can visit our the Digital Fifth YouTube channel. You can visit previous 2 sessions in details that will give you a much deeper insight into these 2 areas. So just quick insights into that, because we work on the product in the various segment, and all this session that we are talking about is all about bringing those experience for the market by working with the different customers, different areas. Like, say, for example, we have been helping some of the customer into building that entire the product strategy in the building the financial products, be it on the Stellups, where that we build the different lending products. And Stellups is on a agri-tech company which works with the farmers in the milk collections, based on that IoT devices that they develop. So now it's a kind of the agri-tech company, you can call it up, and then building and designing the product or the lending products on that business model, right? So that's where we work very closely with them. Money Control, we are working. Zaggle is one of the B2B and the B2B prepaid fintechs, where that we help into building the different products, the neo banking products that we help with. And also we not only just building on the product strategy, but taking the product to the market, right? So in entire the life cycles that we go through, that product ideation, building the product requirement document, the development, the design, and the go to the market. So we have been working with Money Control, JustPay, UB, Fastcall, some of the names that I'm talking about. But when you come to the financial products, there is always a journey attached to it, right? How the customer is going to come to your platforms, engage with your product, and complete the fulfillment process to either get onboarded or consume your financial products. So we have been working very deeply with the banks and the fintechs, helping them into building the product journeys. So that's where our expertise is coming up. So now let's get into that core topics today. So where the product development process, from how do you take that from the concept stage to the launch, right? So that's where that we entire sessions will focus upon next 30 to 35 minutes. So when you start looking from the product development process, typically the life cycle, if you see the entire process life cycle will include where that is will start with the problem identifications, that you identify the rightly the product, build on ideas that how the idea will take care of that problem statement that you have identified in the previous stage. And then you go into that product definition and the planning stage, because now you are moving into the development part of it. Then you go into the design, then you go into development. And once the development has been done, then you need to do any testing, so whether all the initial expectations that you have set out, whether those are getting fulfilled through your product or not. Look at your MVP release, and once the MVP has been pushed into the market, how do you scale from the next level? So let's now get into each one of the things in little detail. Okay, and Akash, let me know whenever there is any hands up comes, so then we'll pick it up the questions. Now, first stage is always about that either problem identification or opportunities, right? You may figure it out that there could be an opportunity. There may not be any kind of the problem statement for the customer, but it could be an opportunities. Let's say, for example, neo banking. So neo banking is a kind of opportunity. It was more like rather than the problem where that how you make that banking much easier for the millennials, right? So that's where that opportunity. So you can look at the problem or the identification, and it's very critical, right? It's depends on that what kind of the problem that customers are facing on daily basis, right? Or something that customer is facing, can it be done a little better, or something else can be introduced maybe as an opportunity which will make the customer life better, right? So that's where the entire focus has to be there, and definitely the product will become very meaningful if it's attached to any direct problem of the customers, right, into their day-to-day life. And it both from the retail and the business perspective, right? So we are going to look into the both the B2C kind of the product as well as the B2B, because the product management entire the concept remain the same. Only the way to look at that retail customers or the business customer may differ, right? And also, once you able to identify any problem properly or the opportunity, it will help you to set up the right features, right? For the which will help you to the product, right? And product orientation in wrong problems definitely is not going to help you. So it's very critical. But when you're doing the problem identifications, you need to look into the customer segmentation that you're trying to attempt into that, right? And it's very important that you understand your segment very well, right? So let's say, for example, if you're trying to look into your retail segment. So when you're trying to understand the retail segment, you try to understand that what are the characteristics which will help you to understand the retail segments. Like say, for example, what gender that you are trying to attempt, what kind of the age segment that you are looking into. Like say, for example, some of the product guys try to build on the product into the teens, right? Some of the prepaid card, you will like FamPay and all this thing. They look at the teens because that's where the problem area, they could figure it out, right? And that's where they wanted to attempt into that. While some of the guys will may focus into that early stages employees, right, who just joined from 20, 23 kind of the guys, right? So age becomes another major factor. The locations, which like it's a pan-India location, is a regional locations, it's an international location understanding is also better. Profession. So is a salaried class, guys, because salaried class will have a different problem statement. While the gig workers, like say, for example, all the gig workers involving into the delivery or the rider or the partners to the any of the D2C kind of the product, right? So their expectation will be totally different. At the same time, also income, education levels, marital stages. So these are the different dimensions. It could be many more. But what point is I'm trying to bring in on the table is that when you're trying to understand the problem statement, then you need to look at your segments, because the same problem for the different segment, the different set of the customers may differ, right? So that's why it's very important that you need to look at that. And it will help you to understand their needs and wants of that particular customer much better, because you will be able to correlate with their personas, right? And what kind of the problems faced. And also it will help you to the building the marketing strategy, right? Because now you're very clear, like, okay, these are the segment that I need to reach out. So when you're building the product, it will help you to align that your outreach plan much better to that particular segment. So this is very critical. I'll just take up some of the examples that how you need to help and help you to understand the personas, and that's where how it will help you to design your product much better. So let's say, for example, if any MBA student that you're trying to study. So you're primarily looking at that millennials who may be just in the college, MBA college or the engineering college, they may have a requirement of the different kind of the bank account, right? So you try to look at it, and these guys, you will figure it out that they may need bank accounts, which is much easier to operate, open, and engage with, right? So that's where like some of the preferences you will start understanding, like they expect the time taken should be very minimal. There should not be any kind of the fees attached to that. It helps them to manage the financial, personal finance management and no documentation. Like some of these millennials may not be comfortable into managing the documents, right? So it's very important that you understand the personas, right? Similarly, when you try to look at the B2B, because many of you may be operating into the B2B payment stage. So there that you need to understand that what categories that you are looking into that. If you're a tech provider, then you try to look at that. Are you attempting for the bank? Are you building the solution for a small finance bank, NBFCs, the fintechs? Which area of business that you're trying to build a product for? Are it for the SMEs, MSMEs, the retail kind of things? What locations, a specific reason, pan-India? So these are the different kind of the personas that you will try to understand in the different B2B customers segments, right? What kind of the products that they are providing, right? So these are the things, some of these things, understand the customer personas from the B2B space. For example, if you are a tech service provider, tech solutions provider, building the technology products, like for example, so a small finance bank may have a different expectation as compared to the large private bank or the public sector bank, right? Because they may not have any kind of the digital maturity, right? They may be starter on the digitals. So that may be the guy, and that's you are building a platform for those kind of the customers. And there they will be looking at the business loans account in 2 days, which can be opened, the renewal process, the integrations in their systems, industrialization of the processes. So once you start understanding, it will help you, right? So this is very important. So how do you go about the problem identification? Once you understand the customer segment, you looked at your product problem statement that you're trying to look into that, and you're trying to redefine that problem clearly. Like some of the examples I've just talked about it, and especially in the B2C, like Uber. So Uber looked at that, all the guys, those people who want to travel, right? They needed a book a cab in advance at the convenience kind of things, right? So that's where the Uber looked at its problem statement. The credit, when they are building up, there was challenge of the people delaying in the credit card payments and not understanding that what are the fees and charges attached to the credit cards, right? So that's a problem that we looked at it, like entire the credit card customers that they look. Or BNPL. BNPL, we're primarily looking into the guys who have not been able to get the credit card, right? So buy now, pay later was primarily attempted to the guys who are not getting the credit card. So it's very clear. And it could be the millennials, right? Because millennials may not typically get the credit card. So how do we handle that credit requirement for these guys? So unavailability of the interest-free credit instrument for the customers with a low or no credit history, right? Those who don't get the credit card. Or the Kotak 811, when the situation came after demonetization, they looked at that, okay, can we find out a mechanism that people can open a bank account without visiting the branches, right? So that's more from the B2C. Similarly, if you try to correlate the same thing problem statement in the B2B space. So let's say, for example, Setu. So Setu looked at that there is a different challenge for some of the customers integrating with the different APIs. So how do we build the stack of the APIs which can be integrated at the much of the convenient mechanism, right? Or the open, which is trying to help the customer to manage their banking as a part of their day-to-day business, like typically SME, MSME customers, which manage the accounting and the banking separately. So how do we make sure that they can manage the banking and accounting at a much easier way, right? Perfuse, looking at the challenge of the customer managing the different bank statement, aggregating the data to get a visibility into the customer finance side of it. So that's where that looking at the Perfuse. Or Hyperface, very recently, it's platforms coming and they're trying to look at that, how to create a platform which makes that any customer to launch a co-branded credit card and without much of the challenges, right? So these are some of the problems within examples that are trying to define, right? And how do you try to really clearly define your problem statement in a much better way, right? So one is that segmentation, understanding, right? And problem identification, but how do you go about it? Doing that research? So you need to do a competitive analysis, understand that who are the competitors who are working in that space and trying to attempt the similar kind of the problem statement that you have identified. Look at your strength, look at their weaknesses, where the gaps are there, right? That will help you to create a differentiator factors. Try to get crucial information like pricing, what are the features are being used, what kind of the market base that each one is operating into that, and build your competitive strategy, right? So that as a differentiator, as a USP, as a differentiated features kind of thing. So that's where you will do the competitive analysis, and also at the same time, market helps you to understand that are there any business potential for this problem statement that I'm looking into that. If there is a business potential, that what could be the size of the market, right? Is it like that I may not be able to build a scale business, okay, or I may not be able to cater to the a larger set of the customer because there is no market. So it helps you to that. It will also help you to whether you will be able to make a profit in that reasons, right? And help you to build the market study, the go-to-market, help you to build a strong teams. So market research goes a very strong element into your whole the product definitions and also help you know the properly crystallizing your ideas, right? So that's where you move into that. The next step you go. So before I go into the next, I just take a pause and if there are any questions coming up. Guys, you can put up a questions in the Q&A sections. Or maybe I don't know, raise your hand and then we'll pick it up the questions. Okay, so we'll continue, right? So look at the idea generation. So now once you have identified the problems, you need to ideate it, like how you're going to solve it, right? That's where the problem, how you're going to create solutions which take care of that opportunity that you have identified, right? And that's where that you do lots of the brainstorming. You've already looked at the market, what are the products are there, what is working, what is not working, you looked at it, and now you try to align it with the different customer segments. Do a complete SWOT analysis for yourself, right? Or for all the ideas which have been generated, do the detailed SWOT analysis to understand that, okay, where your strength lies, where weakness, where the opportunities are there. That the entire the process will help you to define the product concept, and also you will be able to define that entire the purpose that product is trying to cater very clearly. Once these two have been defined, then building the different features through the different user stories during the different epics, it becomes much easier. But if you are not able to get your clarity on your product concept, then it may become very difficult task for you, because unless until the clarity comes at the product definition level, it becomes really difficult to go ahead in the next stage. So product concept primarily providing a very 2 to 3 liner kind of the description of the product or services, very stressed, very short, right? And it has to attach to a problem statement which is linked to the solution problems that you're trying to talk about. So what is the solutions that providing that product, and what is the problem statement that it's going to solve it? So you're able to correlate the definitions and the solutioning that you are trying to bring on the table through your product or the services. So I'll try to simplify with some of the logic, some of the examples, right? Let's look at that. If you try to, based on our understanding, if you try to define that what the product concept would have been for the Kotak 811. So it would be the like solution, zero balance saving account, which can be opened on the 100% digitally through a mobile banking app, right? Now, underline the definition very clearly, highlight that what are the purpose for this product. So it's eliminating the complete need for any customer to visit a branch, right? And just doing that entire onboarding process for the customer on the bank account directly through the mobile banking, right? And reducing the complete time. So you can clearly see that how your product concept has been defined and the product purpose has been linked to that, which is directly attached to that problem statement that you would have identified at the first stage, right? So when I was talking about the product definition, you would have looked at the Kotak 811 examples, right? Eliminating the need for visit. So that's where. Or they look at the credit. So credit analysis of the credit card, hidden fees and charges inside on the bill, and rewards on the prepayments, right? So that's a kind of the product concept. And elimination, its problem statement that it's trying to solve is eliminating the hidden fees and the charges, right? Some of you might be our developers or working very closely, or some of you might not have an idea about like Postman. Postman is a very interesting unicorn product into the API testing, API development management, right? When it was launched, there was a typical challenge of the API testing, API development, and rolling out documentation, right? So they built up the platforms like managing API testing for developers to do a proper end-to-end testing of APIs and making it simpler and fast to use, right? So how to make it the go-to-market fast for any API which has been developed. So Postman is being used by the developers across the globe, right? And the purpose was to build an automated API testing platforms to assist the developers to do their development and testing APIs. And this was kind of the between the problem and the opportunities, right? So that's where you may start looking when it may not be exact problem or kind of the problem, but larger than opportunities that you can look into that. So now these two, primarily the problem and idea generations, will help you to get clarity that what product you are trying to build. Now it's a job to get the deeper into product where that you start defining the product, right? Now your product will start taking a shape in terms of the detailing, in terms of the features, in terms of the requirement document, in terms of the value propositions, right? This is the now, so first two was primarily in the foundations. Better job you do at this stage, you will have the clarity on the product, but making a product in a shape, that's a stage that you try to go deeper into that. Okay, so let's look at that. So when your product definition, you try to develop the product concept and the scoping of the product, right? So you're now detailing out your product ideas, the product concepts. Okay, now product scoping is very clearly will be aligned to target segment, because you would have done the detailing of the product segmentation, the customer personas, the problem statement. Now your entire the documentation of the product will start getting clearly deep, broadened, right? Same time, you have already done the competition study, but do a deep benchmarking to understand what are the features and gaps in the market. Again, support with the customer research to get the more deeper insight into the customer behaviors, and also complete insight into the customer studies and the market research will help you to build the deeper products, right? So that's where you start doing. And very clearly, you need to answer some of these questions very pertinently, which is like why, who, what, and how. Like why you're building this product, for whom you are building this product, for what purpose that you are building this purpose, how the people are going to consume the product, how you're going to launch the product, how the people will get benefited out of the product. So once you start defining these things, it will help you to build your project requirement documents much clearer, right? So these are the dimensions that you need to be very clear about it. This is a classic old examples, old image that many of you may be able to correlate, and it's there for ages, right? At least I'm seeing since my college days, right? Where the requirements have been specified and how the different people, different teams have perceived those requirements, right? And try to conceptualize the product, right? So that's a different dimension that people can look into that, right? So actually customer may be looking at a very simple solution, but how they everybody visualized and all these things. So it's all differs, right? But moment you try to answer those aspects like why, who, what, and how, it becomes much easier to get that product requirements. So this is like a stage when you're doing the product definitions, and now you're moving into building your PRDs, right? Which is product requirement document, which will be again the foundation for the developers, right? For the development phase, that design phase, and all these things. So this become clear, and how you're gonna get your product requirements very clearly documented. For you've already done the current state assessment, like you looked at the problem statement, look at the context, look at the segmentations, right? And you're gathering the information from the grounds, right? Then you're looking at the market trends and the competitors, so you could get a market idea that what are the different products are there, what are the features are there, what is working, what is not working, right? That's all the aspects have been looked at it. And at the same time, you should do the primary research where that you go and speak to your customer. One of the challenges I've seen and our experience has been there, and industry experience, like where the many of the product management fails, where that you don't attach to the customer directly. It means that you have not been on the ground, not understanding the customer, because you may not be understand the problem on your own, right? You may not have experience. Like especially in the B2B case, you can't visualize problem yourself as a product management ever, right? So you need to go to the ground. So let's, for example, we're building one of the product for SME lending. We try to go into the market and try to understand that how they're doing the business, what are the typical challenges for them, what are kind of the information they have. Go and talk to them, right? And sometimes they may have certain things, but they may not be able to make those documentation available for the lending purpose. So, but on the ground, when you are there, you could figure it out that, okay, there are mechanisms, others that we can help you to get the documentation. So it's very important that go and speak to your customers, right? It could be the survey based, it could be one-on-one interaction, and whether it's one-on-one interaction, it helps, right? So let's have an example. I talk about like one of the wealth customers that we were working, and we were designing that, okay, digital platforms for the wealth guys, right? And it was for the HNI customer or the ultra HNI customer. And people were having lots of the debate that, okay, whether these kind of the customer segment will require and a kind of the proper digital platforms or not, because many of will have access to the different team members who can work on their behalf. But when we gone and when we started interacting with many of the guys who were the CEOs, the CXOs, the business heads, and all these things, we could figure it out that yes, they were looking at an ease of convenience on their mobile because they were tech savies, right? They were having the smartphones. They wanted that one click that they can get the portfolio views of their platforms. Can a different dimensions of the reports portfolios can be given as an insight. So at the headquarter level, you may have a different perceptions about the market. But when you go and hit the ground, then you will recognize that, okay, customer is actually looking for something different, or customer is looking something in a other way around it. So it's very important that you go and do the customer service. Well, these are like factual information that you are trying to gather from the market, right? But at the same time, you need to start looking out of the box kind of the solutions, right? Innovative business mind, right? You try to have a brainstorm, you start yourself start thinking different dimensions where that how this problem could be solved. What are the product features that can work for that? It may be very new. I just give an example of very interesting product, which is in the Indian banking industry is also, it's always been there, like joint account, right? Joint account, many of you might be also operating. You're going to have heard of the example of Sterling Bank, right? Sterling Bank is one of the challenger bank in the UK, quite successful. Now, how to go about that, the building that joint account, right? Typical of the process is that they get the both the guys who want to have a joint account together in the branches and then get the joint account open. That's a typical requirement will happen when you start trying to define the joint account. They come out of very different solutions as a product guys, where they told that, okay, why do people need to come to the branches? If they are able to open the individual Sterling bank account on their mobile banking, why can't they open a joint account also on the same mobile phones? So they came out with an idea that, okay, let's bring that both the parties who want to have a joint account, their phones together next to each other, generate a kind of an OTP mechanism which can be exchanged between the both the party to show the relationship. And once the code has been shared between both the applications, Sterling application on the respective mobile phones, and it's got validated, the joint account get created. So that kind of the innovative ideas you need to put into place, right? I'll just give you an example again. So startups that we have been working about it. Now it was that these farmers didn't have any kind of the data sets, like they may not have the proper bank account, they may not have the financial statement, which can showcase that their earning capabilities. They don't have the salary slip and all these things. They had two cattle where that they were generating the milks and then selling in the market. Now these companies, startups is working where that they will having the information of all the farmers coming and pouring the milk on a daily basis, right? And basis that data that of the farmers pouring the milk on a daily basis for the last 3 years, you can able to design that entire the customer income profile for the 2 to 3 years and can make a kind of judgment that, okay, on this basis the lending can be given. So while one hand you will have the standard market practices, standard information, while at the same time putting that innovations is very critical, especially from the today's content. So this is very important for the defining the requirement. And while defining the requirement, at the end, you try to create the collaterals called product requirement documents. And some of the characteristics, some of the inputs that you need to take care of the product requirement documents that define a purpose, so product purpose that has to be defined, set the entire context, including the problem statements, all the discussion notes, everything which has been gathered, right? Try to go detail into the problem statement, try to make it very concise, very clear, so that everybody can understand what are the goodness that your product is trying to bring on the table, like what impact it will create, what kind of the advantage that it will bring on the table. And then try to define the detail in the scopes, right? So, and it's primarily here that you try to crystallize your MVPs and the version 1, version 2 kind of things. Build a complete customer experiences through wireframes, the competitive study, design, user experience, customer journeys, right? Then also you need to add your epics, the user stories, the dependencies, the product matrices, the reference document, open questions. So these are some of the elements that you need to continue to add into the product requirement document. And it may not be the one-time done documents. You may have to continuously keep on visiting some of the things so that at least every aspect, every dimension has been well covered. So with this, before I go ahead, I'll just take a pause and see if any questions are there. So not so for, I just again request if anybody has any questions, you may just raise a hand. Okay, I see a question coming up. Okay, so now guys, I request to all of you, please fill up your, there is a feedback form put into the chat box. So it's always very helpful to us to have a feedback, which will always help us to continue to improve and keep coming on back with the new webinars, new sessions, right? So please fill up your feedback forms. That's very helpful, right? So let's continue. So product requirement documents and one of the other component of the entire the requirement definition is to creating a value proposition canvas, right? And that's also help you to crystallize your features requirement, like what are the features that you're gonna do and what and the feature because features, what the value this feature is gonna create, right? So when you're looking into the customer segment, you will understand, okay, what a customer do, right? What is his day-to-day job, especially with respect to that problems areas that we are looking into that, right? What are the gains that customer is expecting? What are the things that he's looking which will help his life get better, right? But at the same time, there will be some pain area, some problem statement that he want to get away of it. He doesn't want those pains. So when you're building your product, you need to create that your product and services which takes care of the customer's problem statement, like job requirement that which is there. And also try to define that what are your gain creators for that customers, which will help him to provide certain gains to the customer. At the same time, also you need to look at that what are the pain relievers, which are going to take care of the pains for the customer. Let's, for example, it will help you to understand it much easier. Like, say, for example, credit. Now, in the context of the credit, if I try to define the same value canvas, The customer job is that he want to track the credit card expenses, want the bill, pay the credit card bill on the time, right? So that's a typical job is that with this credit card that he was looking. What are the pains he has? He has a pain that, okay, he can't understand the fees and charges, can't see any kind of spend analytics, like where he's spending, what kind of the expenses that he is making on a month basis. And very poor repayment experience, like he is always missing on the dates for the payment. So these are the typical pains that he has. What are the gains that he has? So he has probably gains where that how he can eliminate the hidden charges and also get in a detailed insight into the credit card spend. So you will see some kind of overlap between the pains and the gains. But now look at that, how you're going to define your product. So product is, okay, there is going to be credit mobile app, which will have some of the pain relevance like good repayment experience and rewarding, like influencing you, nudging you to make your payment on the time, and also helping you to detect those hidden fees and charges, right? While some of the gain created, building an analytics engine, which can give you a good analytics insights, right? As well as the kind of the any charges which have been laid, how it can help you to detect those charges. So that's where you start looking into your value canvas. So now both the product requirements as well as the value proposition canvas will help you to define that entire product stack much better. And then you start moving into the product planning stage, which will also help you to build the MVP version, right? In the product planning stage, some of the steps that you need to be very careful about is where that you get into the product budgeting, you're into a commercialization structure, that how you're going to make the revenue generation for that product, what kind of the customer in this geography that you want to hit, that will help you to build your outreach plan. Then how you're going to do the development, whether it's going to be waterfall or the agile kind of the development. And in the next fourth session, we'll try to talk about some of these tools and the framework which will help you to balance that, build the product development. And then you need to do the feature prioritization, because that is very critical, important phase of the entire the planning stage. So you need to do the feature prioritizations, and then resource, what kind of the resource you will require. So these are like some of the steps that you need to follow. Okay. And then when you go into feature prioritization, different methods are there, like say, for example, cost of delay, right? Cost of delay, Moscow methods, opportunity scoring. I'll just talk about some of this, like cost of delay is very important, right? If you don't do right now, then somebody else will do that, or something has happened in the industry. And if you don't take an advantage of it and you don't build on a product, it may have a challenge, right? Say, for example, when the COVID happened and when the RBI allowed the video KYC to happen, many of the guys, the tech providers could able to build that entire solution for the video KYC, right? You can't avoid to be a delay at that moment, because moment you launch the video, RBI allowed for the video KYC, you need to tap on it, right? Because most of the bank will rush on to plugging the video KYC feature into their journeys, right? And that's where some of the leading players who could launch the product video KYC, they could get the larger market share, right? So cost of delay becomes a very straight, without much of the questions that you need to put it on the priority, right? Then Cano method is again, it's primarily looking into that fulfillment stage and satisfaction, right? If you are able to fulfill that features, what kind of satisfaction level you will have, the customer will have. So that's where you start building into that some of these features. Moscow method is like must have, should have, could have, won't have, very straightforward. Like you try to look at that all the features that you have built up, and then see that, okay, what are the features that you definitely need to have, right? Without these features, the customer is not going to look at your product. Customer's basic problem is not getting solved because of the features not there. So must have is clear. Then, like for example, neobank. So neobank we are launching. Definitely, you need to have the saving account linked to that, right? Otherwise, why you're calling the neobank, right? It's a must-have kind of. Then you talk about the thing, okay, you add the wealth, it's good. You could have done the credit card, yes, but better. Won't have remittances, no need at this moment, like because you're targeting millennials, they may not have remittance requirement. So Moscow method is again the clear, very important methods that helps you to the prioritization, sir. So before I go, any other question? I'll just take a pause and see if any questions are there. Okay. But again, continue to request you to fill up the feedback form. That's always help, right? Now, some of these methods that I looked at, that prioritizations, but now when you're getting into the entire development process, when you're moving into the next system, it's very important to get the right team in place, right? And as I said, that is a multi-dimensional exercise that you need to have the various different team members to get on the board, which will, because so far you have been primarily taking a feedback from others, involving with others, but now you're moving into the development phase, right? The design and the development phase. So you need to have the engineering team on board, because they need to gonna do the development. Your team is definitely, the product management teams are gonna be involved, the senior management, because you need to have the buy-ins, right? And they need to give the go ahead for your entire the P&L statement that you would have spoken about, right? The business, the expenses, the cost that you have asked for, you need to have the blessing, right? And so senior management is very critical. The project management. So it's very important to understand the difference between the product management and project management. I think we have covered in the first sessions briefly, but project management, that how you're going to manage it as a product that projects the entire the product development process, so that your entire the time, schedule, the cost and the risk has been well managed. Then work very closely with the sales, because now your product is very clear, your thought processes are clear, the market insight is better. Then work very closely with the sales and marketing team, because while the development will happen, you need to start working into the outreach plan. And then definitely the design team, right? Well, when you're talking about the business, banking level of the digital product, it's also important that you start involving the compliance team. What are the different regulatory requirements that you need to take care of it? What are the risks you can have? It could be the market risk, it could be the financial risk, it could be the credit risk, right? As well as very important, the HR needs to be onboarded, because that where the HR will help you to get the right team in place. So Dilip Thakur, so would the engineering team not be involved from the time of defining the MVP V1 and V2? Yes, for sure. Because that's where some of this mechanism comes into the place. Like when you are doing the project requirement document, at least now you have done the requirements. Well, the prioritization as a product team, you might have done your product prioritization from the market perspective, right? But definitely you need to take care of the engine team involvements, and that's where that the last sessions also we tried to talk about, because it's what they can do, what are the different challenges they may have. It could be possible that there might be some interdependencies on the certain features that which has to come first, which has to come later. Yes, but you are trying to get into the MVP, and that's where we are still in the product planning stage, right? And that's where I spoke about that. You need to get the engineering team now on board. So far, you have been getting a clarity about the product, right? And then all the features and the prioritization. But now, since you're getting into the development, before you get into the development and entire build the blueprint for the development from the MVP to the V1, V2, you need to get the engineering team on board for sure. Because you have not moved yet into the design phase, right? Now, quick certain things on the design, right? So design, once now MVP has been get cleared, engineering team is on board, the design team also is on board. Now you start trying to build a mock-ups, right? Initial first step is typically to try to have a very low mock-ups, right? Based on the certain research and the market and the user experience, that you try to create a kind of the wireframes, a kind of the layouts, right? Not a detailed colors, combinations, the different placement of the different tools, fields and all these things, right? So that's where that low fidelity mockups. But once it gives a great clarity on the journeys and all these things, then you move to the next stages where then you get into the high fidelity mockups, where that start building on the colors, the combinations, the field placement, the icons, how the entire the journeys flow will happen. So that's where the design prototype. Then you get into the development. So development will have both the part, while your engineering team will handle that, but you need to very closely working with them, where that first and one end you will building the entire the backend infrastructure, while other than the front end like mobile app or the web interfaces, where the customer experience will come into play. So you need to take care of both the development of the backend and the front end. While in the backend, when the development is happen, definitely the engineering team need to have the kind of the visibility of the future also, because the entire the backend may not be rebuilt time to time, right? So backend structure in that architecture has to be make sure that it has been designed from the future perspective, future requirement perspective, future feature stacks perspective. So what I'll do that I'll just try to close quickly, and then we'll just come to the question answers. So And then once you have the development is done, it's released for the user acceptance. As a product manager, it's very important that you get involved into user testing on your own self. While you may have a dedicated testing teams, dedicated user groups or the quality control team, but as a customer, as a user, you should also, and as a product manager, you should definitely be involved into the user testing. And I've seen many other places working with the banks and working with the different banks, fintechs, like many times we have seen that product not getting into the right shape in the market because the product manager themselves has not been involved into the testing. So it's very important that you perform the user testings, which is like what are the PRD that you have defined, what are the features that you looked at, are they able to satisfy the product or the platform which has been come. So typical cycle of the user acceptance testing will follow this workflow. And then you go into the MVP release, right? Where that MVP is where that based on the core features. Now you are launching. So what are the customers geography that you are going to launch in the MVP? Because MVP you can't launch in the entire the location, landscape, or the customer segment that you would have identified. Within that customer segments, you would have identified that some certain portion of the sub segment which you're going to hit with some numbers of the customer that you're going to take the product, right? Define some under the MVP success criteria also, right? It's very important that, okay, how you're going to make sure that your MVP is successful. Your certain expectation has to be there. And then get into the feedback and iteration, because MVP is an entire the learning process to get you to understand that, yes, what are the idea that you worked with is working fine, but there is a long way to go. You take the feedback, iterate, and also at this stage, you start looking at how do you start working on the pricing structure, where for what feature the customer is going to pay. So start building in the commercialization plan. And the last, not the least, but also you get into that entire the scaling phase, right? So MVP, you have continued to improve. Now you are moving into the V1, V2, V3, right? And V1, V2, V3 on entire scales will have the multiple iteration, but it will continue to follow the same structure. Like you will continue to have the feature enhancement. You will now look at the product pricing very seriously, because if MVP is done, you are into core product. Most of the product in the industry, especially fintech, you would have seen that they have gone from MVP to version 1 or version 2, where the entire the pricing has been refined and it's completely aligned with the market, right? Now you start working in the distribution channel, because MVP was in your direct control. You were taking the product in the market, but you may need a better distribution structure where that how you're going to push the market to the larger customer segment, and continue to focus on expanding your target segments, right? Target customers where that product can happen. So this is a more on the product scale. So this was just a quick shot on that, giving you just 30 to 40 minutes, giving an insight into the product development process from the product identification, product scale. With this, I'll take a pause and we'll see if any questions are there. So Dilip, again, continue with that. This happens only in the product planning and not definition. Yes, more and say you can say, because both are product definition was a very early stage of the definitions, right? You were trying to clearly, crisply define your product concept, right, and product purposes. But here in the product planning, where that you are getting into that building that entire the product requirements, value canvas that you are trying to create. That's where that you start getting into very clearly that what are the features and then MVP. So I would primarily it's more in the planning stage that you would be going into the MVP. Again, a request to all, please share your feedback. Feedback link has been shared by the team in the chat box of the Zoom itself. So product scaling, Dilip, I think we'll go into the deeper into these product pages into the next sessions, where that how the product is scaling, because that's where that we have been structured that now what are the critical sections and how do you take it to the market, right? Scale at the platform. So because it's very, very difficult to answer. So product scaling is very important. Next sessions will cover that. So if no question, guys, so I think thank you all. Thank you for coming to our sessions and be part of it, our knowledge sessions. Thank you very much, and look forward for you to be in the next sessions and keep visiting our LinkedIn page, our website for the continued update on the our upcoming knowledge session series. As well as you can register for our newsletter, which you can do it at our website, which will continue to give you insight on the market, as well as keep you informed about our upcoming reports, knowledge sessions. So thank you all. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your time.